I would like to call the Monday, October 14th, 2019 meeting of the Blue Springs Planning Commission to order. If I could ask everyone to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome everyone this evening and those watching from home as well. I will run through the agenda real quick. First item will be the consent agenda. Item 2 is a public hearing for rezoning of Liggett Trail, and item 3 is a public hearing for a planned unit development for Liggett Trail. Item 4 is a conditional use permit for Harmony House. Item 5 is a Unified Development Code amendments, and I would let my commissioners know that should say UDCT in the item description there. That'll be the same for 6 and 7 as well. Item 6 will be a public hearing for Unified Development Code amendments, as will item 7. Then item 8 is a master alternative sign plan for Culvers. 9 is a preliminary plat for Axioms Kingswood. 10 is the final plat for Axioms Kingswood. And then item 11 is other business, and then 12 is adjournment. With that, I would entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I have a motion from Commissioner Fairbanks. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Cradoff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Indulge me, I am going to rearrange the agenda just a little bit and move items 8, 9, and 10 to the front. So we're going to start with item 8. And Mr. Stanton's going to present that for us. It's the master alternative sign plan for Culvers.
All right. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Before you this evening is a master sign plan for Culvers, which is located at 1301 Southwest 7 Highway, which is in front of the mall at Fall Creek. The applicant, Springfield Sign, is requesting a wall sign on the southern facade, which, according to the sign code, is not a qualifying facade for a wall sign. The proposed wall sign on that facade is 14.2 square feet, which covers approximately 0.7% of the overall facade. And staff finds that the facade is perpendicular to 7 Highway, therefore visible to northbound traffic. And as well, it's located over the drive-through window on the restaurant, so the sign is applied for more visibility, more advertising opportunities for Culvers. Further, all of the existing signage on the property does meet the sign code, including everything about the sign that they're proposing for the southern facade. The only thing that doesn't meet the sign code is the fact that it's on a facade that's not facing directly public right-of-way or above a main building entrance. So staff finds that this application is consistent with previous master sign plan approvals for a similar situation, and staff recommends approval of the application with the one condition listed in the staff report. And I'll show you a picture of the proposed sign. So all of the signage that Culvers is doing with their remodel is similar to this one. This one is just kind of smaller and located above the drive-through entrance. So with that, there's a representative here from Springfield Sign if you have any questions for them, or I stand open for any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Stanton? All right, thank you, sir. Would the applicant like to come forward and say anything? I just need you to state your name and address, please.
Yeah, Trey Watts, Springfield Sign, 4825 East Kearney, Springfield, Missouri. Just want to thank you guys for hearing this. I'm just here to answer any questions, but as Brad has stated, all within the codes and what's allowed, just besides not facing the main highway there on the frontage. So.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the master alternative sign plan for Culvers ASP-09-19-7078 with the one condition.
All right. I have a motion from Commissioner Banks. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Fairbanks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, that brings us to item number 9, which will be the preliminary plat for Axiom Kings Wood. And Mr. Jury is going to present that. Are you going to do 9 and 10 together?
If possible, yes.
Perfect.
Make it go quicker. Before you today is the request to approve a preliminary plat and a final plat for Axiom's Kings Wood from the applicant Skip Heimer with RMTA Architects and on behalf of the property owner Axiom WC LLC. This property is located at the southeast corner of Northwest Woods Chapel Road and Northwest Kingsridge Drive. It's about 8,300 square feet, just one proposed lot. It's zoned general business, and it is located, or most of this property is located across where Kings Ridge Drive used to be, where it formerly was before it was vacated around 2003. So the developer does now intend to actually use this property with a proposed drive-through ATM. They will have to go, the developer will have to go through site plan design review process after this, and if they are building over it, if they need to build over any part of the easements that are on the property, they will also have to go through a vacation process. But as of now, with the current site plan shown here, they believe that they can miss or that they can build in the 5 or 10% of the property that is not an easement. Whereas most of the property is either a utility easement or reserved from that vacation of the right-of-way process or an existing easement along one of the 2 streets that it abuts now. Altogether, the preliminary plat and the final plat do adhere to the Unified Development Code, and I'll just go over a few of the points of this preliminary plat and final plat. The limits and no access is shown. Let me get to the final plat. Limits and no access is shown and proposed on Kingsridge and Woods Chapel to limit driveway access on such a small property with limited frontage. They will have to utilize the shared drive that they currently have that is to the east of the property to access this property. Pedestrian access is available with the existing sidewalks, so they do have that as well as the current vehicle access. Open space systems are not required with a property this small. They are proposing to dedicate, however, some right-of-way in the northwest corner of the property to adhere to the current requirements for Public Works' site triangle and visibility and for their infrastructure necessary at that corner. Beyond that, public streets and sidewalks already exist, so no public improvements to those are warranted at this time. Any proposed development on such a small site will have minimal impact on the stormwater system, so no improvements are required to that aspect either. They are proposing a 7.5-foot utility easement just on the north side of the vacated Kingsridge Drive to accommodate an existing water line that was pretty much running along the north boundary of that vacated Kingsridge Drive, but with a 7.5-foot utility easement, Public Works now can maintain and dig as necessary to access that existing water line. So that proposed utility easement will cover what is existing. So all required easements are proposed or existing on this site. So with that, staff will recommend approval of the preliminary plat and final plat with 2 conditions, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jury? Yes, Commissioner Fairbanks.
Mr. Jury, could you tell me about lighting at that location?
In terms of proposed lighting,
Yes.
that will be reviewed during the site plan design review process.
Okay.
They don't have anything proposed currently.
Okay, because if there is an ATM there, you got money and you need to have good light. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Jury? All right, would the applicant like to present? If you could state your name and address, please.
My name is Irwin Guard. I'm the owner of Guard Horizon LLC, a land survey company here in Blue Springs, located at 1040 Southwest Luttrell. I think Nathan did a good job in explaining the project. It's been a really difficult site to survey, to say the least, but we made it. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, any questions for Mr. Guard? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. And we will consider the preliminary plat and the final plat separately. So I would entertain a motion on the preliminary plat.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Phillips.
I would move for approval of the preliminary plat PP 09197079
I'll second.
With the
conditions.
All right. I have a motion from Commissioner Phillips, a second from Commissioner Fairbanks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I would also move for approval of the final plat PF 09197080 with the staff conditions.
All right.
I'll second it.
I have a motion from Commissioner Phillips, a second from Commissioner Fairbanks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That will go to City Council at their meeting on, where did I put that? The 21st at 6 o'clock. All right. That brings us now to our public hearings. Before we get into those, I will just run through how the public hearing will commence. I will open the public hearing. I will ask our city attorney for exhibits. I will get staff comments on the item. The applicant will then be given their opportunity to make their presentation. I will then call for witnesses in favor, then witnesses opposed. I will bring it back up here for general questions and discussion among the commissioners, and then I will close the public hearing and we will consider it for a vote. I will say that if you are going to be speaking, you will need to be sworn in, so when you approach the podium, you'll need to state your name, be sworn in, state your name and address. So, with that, the first two, I'm going to open both public hearings for the Liggett Trail Education Center for the rezoning, which will be RZ 09-19-7085, and for the Plan Development Concept Plan, PDC 09-19-7086. I will open both of those public hearings. I will call for the exhibits.
Chairman Graham, I offer the following exhibits into the record for rezoning RZ 09-19-7085. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, 185-foot notification map. 5, names and addresses of property owners within 185 feet of the site. 6, copy of the letter sent to said property owners. 7, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 8, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference. And for the Plan Development Concept Plan, PDC 09-19-7086, I offer the following exhibits into the record. 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, 185-foot notification map. 5, names and addresses of property owners within 185 feet of the site. 6, copy of the letter sent to said property owners. 7, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 8, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Wright is going to make the presentation for us this evening for those two items.
Thank you, Chairman Graham and Commissioners. Before this evening are 2 requests related to Liggett Trail Education Center. The first is a rezoning and the second a PD concept plan. For the Liggett Trail Education Center, which is located west of Southwest Liggett Road and approximately 650 feet south of the intersection of Liggett and Southwest Moreland School Road. The site covers approximately 24.79 acres and is currently zoned SF7 single family residential. and currently includes an approximately 34,300 square foot school building. The first request is to rezone the property to a planned development, retaining the base SF7 zoning district. The rezoning to a planned development is required for two reasons. The first is that the building addition will increase the total building area by more than 25%. And the second is that under the 2015 UDC, this building would be classified as a prominent civic building, which requires that any site over 5 acres be required a master plan approval through a plan development process. Therefore, the rezoning does not change on the underlying zoning district, but it does require a plan development to proceed with the building expansion. This rezoning, staff does find that the rezoning request is consistent with the 2014 comprehensive plan, the approved area plan for the S1 area, and the UDC, and is appropriate for the site. The second request is for a plan development concept plan, which would allow the expansion of the existing education building. The proposed expansion would be approximately 19,000 square feet and is located kind of on the southwest side of the existing school building. This addition would accommodate additional classroom, administration offices, a multi-use room, and associated building services and facilities. The proposed building elevations and materials are in keeping with the existing school building, which would include a mix of brick, lap siding, wood cladding, and metal. Also, the massing and projections, as well as the height, are also in keeping with the existing building. As the site is already developed, there are minimal site improvements that are required. There are no changes proposed in terms of access. They currently have one and are proposed to retain one existing access off of Liggett Road. They also already have parking on site that is not proposed to be expanded. However, there are a few modifications that are being requested as part of the PD concept plan, which would include allowing the prominent civic building type in the SF7 zoning district, waiving all bike parking requirements for the site, and to allow existing nonconformities for pedestrian access requirements to remain. Only the new building addition would have the existing or the new pedestrian requirements provided. So, a Schedule C parking study was provided as required for school land uses, and it was determined that the site already has adequate parking to meet the needs of the school addition. Bike parking has been requested to be waived due to the students being served at the facility, as well as few parents, students, and staff are coming from the immediate neighborhood, as this is a district-wide school, so it's not a neighborhood school where there would be a lot of students and staff from the nearby neighborhood walking or biking to the school. The site already does meet all open space and landscaping requirements, and based on the concept plan, very few trees will be removed as part of the construction. Staff does find that the application meets the PD concept plan review criteria and does recommend approval of the rezoning of the site to SF7 single-family residential with a plan development, and approval of the plan development concept plan with 3 staff conditions. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions? Doesn't look like there's any. Would the applicant like to come up and be sworn in and make your presentation?
Greg Brennan, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Need your name and address.
Okay, Dan Anderson, 1311 Southeast Eastridge Circle, Blue Springs. Yeah, we're excited. Thank you, Matt. This is the culminating project for the 2018 bond. It's our early childhood center. Cub Care's outgrown its space over at Hall McCarter Education Center. So we've always had an extension onto the Liggett Trail. That was part of the original build at that time. We just didn't have enough programs to establish that. So this made sense for us to go ahead and make the expansion there and bring in 12 classrooms, which will help Miss Malone expand her program, given the multi-purpose space, which will help the current students that are at Liggett. And so we're excited to bring that, bringing in the wind shelters in there as well for the students, and so we're excited to bring that project forward for you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Yes.
Yes, Scott.
Mr. Casey.
Thank you. Excuse me. I was just curious how many students you're serving there currently, and what how many students you would be serving after this expansion.
Yeah, approximately it's about 120, and they go from infant to toddler age, and so with the extra classrooms, we'll be getting closer to about 140.
Okay.
Students with that. And she still has a waiting list, so down the road it may be that we need to expand. And once again, we're making a lot of civil changes so that we can keep the integrity of that property and keep it, beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Anderson? All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody that would like to speak in favor of this petition? All right, seeing none, is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back up here if there's any discussion on the record between the commissioners.
Chair?
Yes,
I'd
Commissioner.
like to ask staff if there were any of the 185-foot letters sent that were returned, and
No,
any
sir.
letters of opposition.
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, anything else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close both of the public hearings on the rezoning and the plan development concept plan, and ask if there's any further discussion on the rezoning. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Billups.
I would move to recommend approval of the rezoning RZ 09197085 with the 3 staff conditions.
No conditions on that one?
No conditions on that one. I'm sorry, those are on the other part, right?
Yes, just as for the rezoning.
Okay.
So
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Billups, a second from Commissioner Fairbanks. This will be a roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Planning Commissioner Cradoff.
Aye.
Commissioner Casey.
Aye.
Commissioner Banks.
Aye.
Commissioner Billups.
Aye.
Commissioner Peel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Stokenberry.
Aye.
Commissioner Hose.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks.
Aye.
Chairman Graham.
Aye. So that passes. That will go to City Council on the 21st at 6 o'clock with our recommendation of approval. Is there any other discussion on the planned development concept plan? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Billups.
I would also recommend approval of the plan development concept plan PDC 09197086 with the 3 staff conditions.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Billups. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Banks. This will be a roll call vote as well.
Planning Commissioner Casey.
Aye.
Commissioner Banks.
Aye.
Commissioner Billups.
Aye.
Commissioner Peel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Stokenberry.
Aye.
Commissioner Hose.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks.
Aye.
Commissioner Cradoff.
Aye.
Chairman Graham.
Aye. And that passes as well, and we'll be going to City Council on the 21st at 6 o'clock with our recommendation for approval. Brings us to our next item on the agenda, which was item 4, the public hearing for a conditional use permit on CUP 09197084 Harmony House. I will open the public hearing. I will call for the exhibits from our city attorney.
Chairman Graham, I offer the following exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, 185-foot notification map. 5, names and addresses of property owners within 185 feet of the site. 6, copy of the letter sent to said property owners. 7, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 8, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Jury is going to present this to us.
Thank you, Chairman Graham and the Planning Commission. Before you today is a request from Harmony House Care Homes on behalf of the property owner requesting approval of a conditional use permit for a commercial daycare use located at 910, 920 Southwest 37th Street, which is on the east side of 37th Street, about 300 feet north of westbound 40 highway at that location. The property in question is about 1/4 of an acre. It is just one platted lot and zoned GB PUD, which means General Business Planned Unit Development, since this shopping center that exists at this location was built as a planned unit development with shared parking and everything. The request for the conditional use daycare, commercial daycare is required to go through this process, and there are some special use standards that commercial daycare is subject to. A couple of them being state licensing and business licensing, and those will be required to be taken care of prior to business license issuance. The only site development special use standard for commercial daycares specifically is about the queuing and the loading. So the vehicle drop-off area for commercial daycares are required to have a loading zone capable of holding 1 car per 10 licensed occupants, and the parking on the site does provide enough for that, and they are required a little bit more parking than this 1 per 10 licensed occupants, based on the provided information from Harmony House. They will be having 18 employees at max with 40 pupils, and the parking requirement would be about 22 spaces based off of that. With 1 per employee plus the 1 per 10 occupants or pupils. So in other words, the parking on site, there's 15 spaces and 22 are required, but the shopping center or the planned unit development as a whole does have a shared cross-access and common space easement across the whole shopping center that's recorded at the county. And so the parking for the whole shopping center can count towards each other's parking requirements. And so in essence, this property does have the vehicle drop-off area necessary to accommodate the conditional use request. One caveat to that, staff is just looking at the aerial view here. The one concern that staff does have is about queuing, loading. The applicant did say that their business encourages the people, people to drop off their pupils by parking in a parking space and then walking them to their entrance. But if this or any other daycare goes in, staff does want to just make sure that one of the conditions of approval is that any queue line, if it ever does happen, needs to wrap around and drop off from 37th Street and should not queue off of 40 highway, just to make sure that there aren't any traffic issues based on queuing off of 40 highway and a backup that could lead to. So just providing a queue line as long as possible on this property and the shared properties that it has that are included in the common space. Altogether, the parking requirement went over just a little bit ago, but there is the bicycle parking requirement according to our code. They will be required 5% of the required vehicle parking spaces, which equates to 1 bicycle parking spot, which if an employee lives nearby, they could potentially use. Landscaping, there is quite a bit of landscaping on the site existing, and there's almost 4 times the amount of landscaping existing as landscaping is required. The only portion where it does deviate from the required code is on the north side of the building. There is a 25-foot buffer requirement, and there's only about 20 feet between the building and the property line. But as a non-conforming issue, we don't require the building to be brought into conformance so the building can stay. And that 25-foot buffer is in essence just a non-conforming issue that's grandfathered in. The screening of any outdoor equipment, lighting, or any building additions, if any of those are proposed, whether it's outdoor dumpster, trash enclosure would be required, or any air conditioning units, screening would be required. Lighting and any building improvements should also come up to conformance for any additions to the site. But everything that currently exists is allowed to remain. Just whenever anything is proposed to be improved, then at that point, building permit would be able to catch any of those requirements. Altogether, staff does recommend approval of the conditional use request with 4 conditions, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jury? Yes, Commissioner Billups.
Just want to double check, is there any kind of a restriction or anything on this conditional use with proximity to the bar or tavern?
No, unless it's a state requirement, but provided they can meet their state licensing, which is part of that conditional use, then the city doesn't have.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Jury? Yes, Commissioner Casey.
With regards to the parking, are those other sections that are in that shared lot, are they in use currently, or are they open right now? When's the bar? I guess I want to know a little bit more about our requirements if we're close to maybe being over capacity there with that additional requirement.
Yeah, and we do have shared parking or shared parking allowances, and so if there's uses that offset in times, like the bar doesn't use the parking at the same time typically as drop off for kids or pickup. So
that makes sense.
With the other uses and the existing parking, the shared parking is within our allowances.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Jury? All right. With the applicant, yes, Commissioner Fairbanks.
Is there another daycare in here, or is it just the Giggles and Jiggles?
I am not entirely sure.
Okay, I was thinking that there might be another daycare, 2 buildings.
Is there one on that far corner? There may be one in this far corner site.
That's what I was thinking, there was one there. Thank you. It's a totally different daycare.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Would the applicant like to make a presentation? You'll need to be sworn in and state your name and address.
You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this case is the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Need your name and address?
I am Lisa Gensarelli. I live at 3820 Northeast Independence Avenue in Lee Summit, Missouri.
Will you spell your last name for us,
Okay.
please?
It's Giancerelli.
Gensarelli?
Gensarelli.
Gensarelli.
Yep.
All right.
One more time, please.
Okay, sorry. Giancerelli.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So we are contracted with the state of Missouri, and we provide residential and day services for adults with disabilities. So we already have our day program right now on 7 Highway. In order to get to our day program, there are stairs into the basement, which is where it is. So if we relocate to this location, it will help us be able to serve more individuals who have maybe mobility issues who aren't able to get down there. So, any questions?
Any questions? Doesn't look like
Okay.
it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone that would like to speak in favor? Yes, sir. You'll need to be sworn in, state your name and address.
You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this case is the truth, so help you God?
I do. Shannon Simmerman. I represent the property owners. I live at 17009 East 43rd Terrace Court South in Independence, Missouri. I've been trying to help the owners with this property for multiple years to find a good, decent occupant for the property. And as they did mention, it is an adult daycare, not a child or infant daycare. So it would be a very good use for the property. I think they'd be very good tenants as it goes. And the owners would love to get the property filled and with the user in it. So.
Any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
We do own the building next door as well at 930 through 936. So right now it's only leased on a month-to-month basis, currently being used by EquipBid, which is an online auction service. So they don't actually have occupants there, maybe more than 2 or 3 people at a time, and then people come in to pick up the equipment that they bought online. So shouldn't be any conflicts with that either.
So you don't foresee a parking issue? Perfect. All right. Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other people that would like to speak in favor? Anyone that would like to speak in opposition? I'll bring it back up here to the commissioners. Any other discussion on the record? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And if there is no other discussion, yes, Commissioner Banks.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
To approve the conditional use permit for Harmony House of CUP-09-19-7084 with the 4 staff conditions.
I have a motion from Commissioner Banks. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Fairbanks. This will be a roll call vote.
We're going to go with Planning Commissioner Billups.
Aye.
Commissioner Peel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Stokenberry.
Aye.
Commissioner Hose.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks.
Aye.
Commissioner Cradoff.
Aye.
Commissioner Casey.
Aye.
Commissioner Banks.
Aye.
Chairman Grant.
Aye. And that passes. And that does not go to council, so you are good. So that brings us to item 5, which will start our public hearings on Unified Development Code amendments. The first one will be UDCT 09-19-7081. I will open that public hearing and ask for any exhibits from our attorney.
Chairman Graham, I offer the following exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 5, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Mallon is going to present this evening. So it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. We will take these one at a time. So bear with me. These Unified Development Code text amendments can get a little lengthy, but I want to give you a proper explanation of everything that's being proposed before you. So the first one is 09-19-7081, which are amendments that we termed to amend and adopt regulations for the development procedures, regulations, and standards that are contained within the UDC. And what these are many of you are familiar with. We bring periodic code amendments through about twice a year. As we implement the code through development applications or through questions or building permits and things of that nature, we recognize things that may need to be changed or modified to be in more conformance with current contemporary planning standards, or that we recognize process improvements that we can make to help make the development process more streamlined, more efficient, or easier to navigate, as well as things that we just notice that are errors or things that need to get cleaned up. And so we've brought a number of these over the years, like I said, 1 or 2 a year since the current UDC was adopted in 2015. And this is one of those, and so that's why this first one is a little bit longer than some of the other UDC text amendments that you have seen lately. The last time we brought one of these similar type amendment packages forward was in February of this past year. Before I begin, I just wanted to take note that the Development Advisory Commission did hear these proposed modifications on their October 4th meeting of this year and recommended approval. Likewise, the Downtown Review Board heard these amendments, at least the ones related to the Downtown Development Code, on October 1st, and they recommended approval of the language as well. And the amendments after tonight will be forwarded to the City Council for formal adoption or not on October 21st. Like I said, these proposed changes are, staff believes, are needed in order to correct errors and or make the UDC easier to implement and understand, as well as to offer some process improvements. So specifically, I believe there are 10 or 11 of them, and we'll go through each of those one by one. The first one is to introduce a new development process or development review procedure, which is titled Alternative Development Standards. The goal under section 403.160. The intent of this new section is to help streamline the development process by basically eliminating the need for an applicant to go through a variance request in addition to another concurrent development proposal request that would go to the Planning Commission. The way our current system is set up is if somebody is proposing a conditional use permit or preliminary subdivision plat or a site plan design review, and as part of those applications they don't meet a section or two of the Unified Development Code, they have two options. They can either rezone to a planned development and do a planned development concept plan and a planned development final plan, or they can ask for a variance as part of that. Both of those two procedures involve an additional public hearing step through either the City Council, if there were a PD zoning, or through the Board of Adjustment for a variance. And so what we're proposing here is that if a development application is going through the process, one of those types, either a preliminary plat, conditional use permit, or a site plan design review, that to help streamline this process and to remove kind of a duplicative step in many ways, that they can basically propose an alternative development standard, which is akin to requesting a variance from a standard, such as a setback or a parking ratio or any number of things, setbacks or landscaping, some of the other development regulations we have in the code, and I'll go through those in a minute, and have those heard concurrently at the same public hearing by the Planning Commission. So that way they wouldn't have to go to the Board of Adjustment and get a variance and then come back before the Planning Commission for, say, a site plan design review. An example of this that's pretty fresh in our memories is the Dental Depot that was recently approved down on South 7. Before that came before Planning Commission for their site plan design review application, they went to the Board of Adjustment to ask for a variance for the building setback. And so that added about 2 weeks, and depending on the schedule between the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission meetings, could be up to a month. And so staff feels that it would be a benefit to both the applicants as well as staff and the boards and commissions to be able to basically combine those into one request that comes before the Planning Commission. Some of the, and they can only be done in conjunction with one of those applications. This isn't intended to replace a variance for an already built house and somebody wants to do an addition to the back and they want to encroach into a rear setback. This is not intended to replace that. It's also not intended to replace the planned development zoning kind of concept where a unique development is being proposed that can't meet all of the development standards and wants to propose something different. So that wouldn't replace either of those. It's kind of for those instances like we just had with Dental Depot where they're proposing a development and as part of that they can't meet all of the standards, and so they're going to propose something different, an alternative development standard. The eligible standards from which they can propose something different than the code is pretty much everything that's in the code except for land uses. What we're not proposing, and I want to make this clear, is that if you have a commercially zoned property, you can't request an alternative development standard that then allows residential zoning. So that is a zoning question. That is something that should be, follow the standard zoning process. Come before Planning Commission for a recommendation of rezoning. If you want to do a use that's not allowed on the property, you need to change the zoning on that property to allow that use. And so we're not suggesting that this be done for that. But it would allow zoning district regulations such as setbacks, height, floor area ratio, lot coverage, lot size, lot width, all of the things that come up during the site plan review process or preliminary plat or conditional use process. There are special use standards and accessory use standards that we've brought before you, and one of those is contained later on here in tonight, but special use standards, if somebody wants to vary from those, we now have a provision in the code that allows them to ask for that through approval of a conditional use permit to come before this board, so that's kind of keeping in line with those. Subdivision design and improvement sections, so lot widths, things of that nature, lot frontages. We had a development probably about a year ago that came through and did a planned development, and the main reason is they couldn't meet the lot frontage on a couple of cul-de-sac lots. And so we steered them towards the planned development zoning because we really didn't have another option. But that's really not the intent of a PD zone. The intent of a PD zone is to really try to get something unique, something that's different, not just something that's trying to not meet the code. And so we feel that this would be a good avenue to allow that to happen. So how this would work is that at the time an applicant applies for one of those applications, a concurrent application, they would need to let the community development director know at that time that they're going to be requesting alternative development standards, put those in writing, and commit to those being the standards that they request, being different. Everything else would be per the UDC. And so they don't just get to say, hey, 6 months into construction, and they find that they don't meet one of the code standards that they said, oh yeah, we wanted an alternative development standard on that. That's not how this is intended to work. It's upfront. It's just as transparent as a variance or a PD zoning request. It's just being done at the same time and to come before the same board that those other applications would. And another reason that staff feels that this is would be beneficial to both the development community and staff, as well as the city overall, is that the Planning Commission in many ways is better suited to work with an applicant in terms of negotiating or imposing conditions to help offset maybe some of the site impacts that alternative development standard may put on the site. Using Dental Depot as an example, during the Board of Adjustment variance request, it was asked by one of the members of the Board of Adjustment, are they going to put any additional landscaping in because they're getting this reduced setback? Well, at that time, they didn't have a final landscape plan because they hadn't gone that far yet into their landscape design with their site plan. But that would be a completely appropriate question for, and typically does happen with the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission would say, I vote to approve this or recommend approval, but I'd like to see some additional landscaping put on behind the building. And so to have that kind of back and forth or discussion, we feel like that Planning Commission is the appropriate board to have that, and to tie it more to that application so that they kind of go in concert together. That is basically a summary of that code amendment. There are review criteria in here that basically state that it'll help serve the public interest, that it will be consistent with the objectives of a comprehensive plan, that the development alternative is consistent with other provisions of the chapter, that it will not create unusual noise, traffic, or other conditions or situations that may be objectionable, detrimental, or incompatible with other land uses in the area. And it will not result in any conditions or circumstances contrary to the public health, safety, and general welfare. So very similar to kind of the zone or the variance criteria, just making sure that it's not going to have a negative impact on it. The other key ingredient of this code amendment is that if an applicant does wish to utilize this, it automatically would trigger a public hearing. So we have site plan design review applications that can be heard administratively by staff. We have site plan design review applications that come before this board that don't come in the form of a public hearing. They're often just a presentation, but it's not a public hearing with the public notification advertisements and things of that nature. So we feel that if somebody is going to ask for something that is not what the UDC would require, such as a variance or a PD zoning request, both of those applications require a public hearing. And we feel that it would be appropriate to have that be heard by the public as well and give the public a chance to have input on that if they're not going to meet the code. And so if it's already like a conditional use permit already has a public hearing associated with it, it would just fall in line with that. But if it's for an application that does not require a public hearing, then we would be having a public hearing on that item to give the chance for the public to speak on that. Any questions on that first proposed amendment?
Commissioner Fairbanks.
It said that the community development director could approve minor variations. What would be construed as a minor variation?
The way that's intended is that if they say we want to have in lieu of a 15-foot setback, we want a 10-foot setback, and it turns out to be, a 9.8 setback or something very minor that, or a percentage of, if they need, say, 25 parking spaces, and they've requested to only be able to have 20, and then it turns out they can only have 19. So we didn't directly put a percentage on it, but are envisioning that to be used very sparingly. But as just the typical development pattern, as things come in and they come in at the plan level and staff reviews it and the applicant agree on it and they go into the building permitting stage and then they actually start building it, as things happen in site construction, changes happen. Right. And so this is intended for in those instances when something happens and that it's very minor, that the director either feels comfortable making that change administratively or not. He absolutely has the authority to say, no, that's too big of a change. I'm going to make you go back to the Planning Commission.
Okay. The other question I had was on the, and maybe it's in a different part of the code amendment, maybe this is not the right one, but I thought it was reducing the height of some of the first floor, second floor, third floor buildings.
Yeah, that is in the next proposed amendment related to the downtown development code.
Okay.
So I'll address that here shortly.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Phillips.
You touched on something here, and I just want to make sure we're clear. If we're looking at a public hearing, say on a conditional use, and we've got one of these alternative design standards that's kind of thrown into that public hearing, when we're doing that public use or conditional use public hearing, we're very limited on what we can use as a criteria to make our decisions. Will this allow us to add some decision factors, I guess, in approving the conditional use with a variance or with an alternative standard or something like that?
I believe it would, yes.
I don't want to. I want to make sure that we're broadening our scope in that public hearing so that we can look at everything that's being considered, not just the conditional use.
It would be the conditional use, but also the criteria for these alternative development standards.
Could we approve one without the other, or
yeah,
would we?
You could. I mean, because the conditional use permit can be pretty broad in terms of what it's being reviewed for. Is it the compatibility of that use with the adjacent land uses, and kind of following along with that, if they request an alternative development standard that doesn't make it more compatible or makes it less compatible, say an encroachment into a setback, that you could theoretically deny the alternative development standard because you would be okay with the conditional use if it met setbacks. So I think the way we intended it was that they would be kind of separate, tied together but separate, that you could approve the conditional use without having to approve the alternative development standards. I guess theoretically you could approve the alternative development standards without the conditional use, or you could put conditions on the conditional use to make them more fit together. But the idea would be that they would be two separate approvals.
And you would make that clear to us when you were doing this?
Yes, yes. We'll have to, kind of figure out as we go and how we present that to you. But that would be our intent, is to make that crystal clear up front that as part of this application, they are doing these requests for alternative development standards. In addition to that, here are the standards that they're requesting to be different or to modify, and kind of present it the way we do when we do a site plan design review at the same time as a conditional use permit, in our presentation at least. And in our staff reports, we'd be clear in breaking those out and addressing how each application meets the criteria outlined in the code.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, I commend staff on going anything to streamline the process and make this easier on the applicants and not having to go back and forth between boards. So I'm all in favor of this. I just want to make sure we're clear on how it's going to function.
Yeah, understood.
I did have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Bay.
Will you be presenting the alternative standards before the conditional use, since you said you're going to still keep them separate? Because that could make a decision of whether we approve the conditional use.
I'm not sure yet. I don't think we've figured out.
We're just working on it.
Yeah, this is getting it into the code, and then the actual implementation may be by the policy of how we bring these forward. Maybe at the next work session that we have, we can kind of talk about how this goes, or maybe when we actually get one of these, we can, if this gets approved, we can kind of feel our way around how best to present that to the commission. But I'd be happy to take any recommendations from the commission on how you'd like to see those.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Fairbanks.
We had that nice training session where you provided all those steps when we can ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're trying to figure out where this alternative would fit in and what could be asked of it.
Right. Okay.
It's like,
yeah, I totally understand that.
It's
because
like, okay, here and here and here and here, and now you're throwing in something else, and it's like, okay, where's it fit?
Right. So we'll have to, at staff's level, make it, try to our best to separate those two. That they're related, but they're independent. I mean, they're tied to each other, but it's just like the variance. If somebody goes before the Board of Adjustment, and they don't get their variance, they can still come before the Planning Commission and ask for approval of their site plan design review. They just would need to meet the code at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else up to this point? All right.
Okay. The second one is related to the Downtown Development Code, Section 404-240. The first amendment under 5A would allow these are building types. These are accessory. They would allow accessory units, row houses, apartment buildings, mixed-use buildings, live-work units, small civic buildings, and we're adding to that rooftop decks, patios, and associated enclosures. Excuse me. So over the years, we've had some requests for these to add, say, a rooftop deck to a building on Main Street or something along that, or to add a patio or other kind of outdoor space for the business, or even it could be for a residential use. And so this would just be adding that as a permitted building type. The second one would be in terms of the, it's kind of difficult to explain, but that's why there's a graphic here. So let me go down to that. And if I need, I may have Matt jump up and do this one as well. So right now in the T4 zone, it states that mixed-use buildings and live-work buildings shall have a sidewalk level floor to ceiling height of 15 feet. So that's measured interior to the building. And those mixed-use buildings need to have a height from the floor up to the ceiling of that first floor be 15 feet. After reviewing some buildings that we've recently seen for downtown and doing a little bit of research on some other codes and Main Street zoning districts and mixed-use zoning districts, we found that that's a pretty high number. I would guess that this ceiling in here is probably around 15 feet, maybe a little bit taller, but that's really designed for a more urban environment that you may find in, say, downtown Kansas City or downtown Denver, where you have a very old building that has that very large first floor, and then subsequent floors above it are required to be 10 feet measured from floor to ceiling. And so what we're proposing is to change that to floor height of 12 feet, and by that I mean not the ceiling, but the top level of the next floor of 12 feet, and that subsequent upper floors should be 9 feet, floor to floor. So that would allow a drop-down ceiling. It would allow basically more contemporary building standards that we've seen. One of the buildings that we had in downtown recently, the dental office down there, when they saw that standard, it wouldn't work for their needs, frankly. They said that we can't have a 15-foot height in a dentist's office because patient privacy, and by the time we drop the ceiling and all of our equipment down from a 15-foot ceiling, it's going to be rather expensive, and basically they wouldn't have been able to build that building. And so we looked back through the history of how that number was kind of generated, and it looks like it was pulled from a model code somewhere, and that, from 10 or 15 years ago. And in looking at some other standards that we found in other cities throughout the metro that have these mixed-use building standards, we found that 12 feet was kind of a general consensus of how that is measured. So that's why we're bringing that before you. And the same thing would apply to mixed-use buildings in T5. And so the graphic here hopefully kind of explains that maybe a little bit better than I do. But we would be measuring, instead of from the floor to this ceiling right here being 15 feet, we're saying the floor to the floor is 12 feet, and then upper floors are 9 feet, floor to floor. Any questions on that section under section 2?
Commissioner Fairbanks.
I'm curious about how they're going to get the sprinkler systems and the ventilation systems in with that height, particularly on the upper floors that you're moving from 10 feet to 9 feet.
These are just minimum standards. So if they have to go taller, they can. And they would have to meet all building codes. So this is just for the zoning code. And one of the reasons we looked at this is typically when we review, usually the building department is responsible for looking at floor to ceiling on the inside. And we typically don't get involved with that. So this was kind of one of those codes where, as the planning department was getting involved with what was going on the inside aside from the use, which is a little bit something that we typically don't look at. We are mostly more concerned with the exterior of the building. So typically the sprinkler systems and everything, that's all going to be reviewed by building and fire department. So they would have to meet those codes in addition to this minimum standard.
So it's a minimum, not a maximum.
Correct.
And does this apply if they're going to retrofit a 75-year-old building?
It would. If they were going to take a mixed-use building and turn that in, they would need to meet this new requirement if they were going to completely remove all the floors and everything.
Right, just get the building and build it.
Yes.
Okay. Because I mean, hypothetically, if you have a 3-story building, you could actually add another floor.
Yeah, so if they were to add another floor, the new floor would need to meet that 9-foot requirement.
Okay, so if they took a 3-story building and reconfigured on the inside, they could have a rooftop that would not have to be 9 feet?
Yeah, it would still have to be the 9-foot, meet the 9-foot requirement.
So a rooftop would have to meet the 9-foot requirement?
If they're adding another floor, yes. The new floor that they're adding would need to meet that 9-foot requirement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just didn't see how all the systems, the ventilation and the sprinkler systems that are required could be in that lower amount. But if that's a minimum.
Yeah, if they can't get them to fit in the 9-foot, then they're going to have to raise it.
Yeah, then they'd have to go up
taller to get it in there. But if they can get it in there, they can keep it at the minimums.
Right.
All right, any other questions? Commissioner Billups?
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. When I read through this, first off, I really like the idea of going floor to floor. That makes a lot more sense than trying to do floor to ceiling, because you never know where a ceiling is going to end up once they get done with drop ceilings and all kinds of stuff like that. But what I'm seeing here, in my mind anyway, is that we're shrinking the standard twice. Not only are we shrinking the standard by going up to the floor level as opposed to the ceiling level, but we're also lowering the minimum height factor as well. And what I'm afraid of is what we were just talking about, is that when you get rafters and HVAC and everything else put in there, you end up with an upper story that maybe only has a 7-foot ceiling.
Right.
Or you get a lower level that's going to be a large, expansive space that, because of all those other factors, you end up with a very long, wide, low space. And it meets the requirements, but it's not very inviting. Mm-hmm. So I like the floor to floor. I'm not sure I like reducing the height at the same time.
Okay.
I guess I'm confused. If we lower the floor, but it doesn't meet the standard for the fire department and for that, that building would not be acceptable at that level. So it is just a minimum,
well,
right?
As long as it's got all the sprinkler systems and everything in there, it could have a 8-foot ceiling or something like that in there. But an 8-foot ceiling in a 1,000 square foot room is going to be very oppressive. It's not going to be very inviting for that retail or restaurant or whatever happens to be in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
claustrophobic.
Yeah, exactly.
Claustrophobic. Because if you get a lot of people in there, and that's what I'm envisioning, is a lot of people, and socializing, I think it needs to stay at a higher level.
Yeah,
I really do.
I like going floor to floor because that's a much easier thing to measure. But I think we leave it at 15 and 10 to allow for all those things that have to go in between the floor and the ceiling, so that those ceilings don't get oppressive. That's just my opinion.
Have you had instances where this has come up? Because I'm thinking most people that are putting in a business, whoever they're working with, architect, engineer, what is going to work with them and say, you're going to want a higher ceiling than that, and most of them are probably going to do it unless they want more of a cozy lowered ceiling. And that might be what their restaurant might be.
You hope that they're going to do that because it's going to make it more inviting, but there's going to be somebody who's going to say, oh, well, this is the minimum and this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the rest, this is just unique to downtown. The rest of the city, we don't have any restriction or minimum of what the floor to ceiling height is, and we haven't had an issue, I don't think, anywhere else with extremely low ceilings in new construction elsewhere outside of downtown. The only new construction that we've had in downtown since this code took effect in 2007 is Blue River Family Dental. And we did get them to that 15 foot, but we had to accompany their drop-down ceilings to be able to hold their medical equipment and everything. So, and we only applied that, since it does say sidewalk level, we only applied that to the front portion of the building that faces the sidewalk. So their ceiling heights are a little bit lower in the back because that 15-foot floor, the way it's written right now, floor to ceiling, was extremely high for.
No, I agree with that, but I think by raising the standard to floor, you give them that benefit without also lowering the height number at the same time. I think you're double. You're going too far by doing both of them together.
Okay.
And I know we do hopefully have some live-work units that are, at least have been talked about and someday will get built
Yes.
here in downtown, and these standards will apply to those. So.
That's what I was just going to ask, because we're worried about this, but yet there's not a lot.
Well, there's the whole area where the old drive-through bank was that is slated to be these live-work units that this would apply to.
This is kind of
if that ever comes through.
In preparation. We know that something new construction will come eventually. And
You're
this
anticipating.
is something that we are.
Yeah, I'd like to have it set in place before they show up.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's just my opinion.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Okay. Let's see, we're Section 3. Section 3 is an amendment to the building type standards. So right now in the UDC, we have a number of building types identified for both commercial and residential land uses. We have, like for commercial, we have a general industrial building, a general commercial building, a pad site. For residential, we have a single family house or a large lot or a duplex and things of that nature. But when we adopted this code in 2015, we really didn't anticipate those types of buildings and uses that don't fit neatly into those residential or non-residential categories, such as a water district water tower or an electronic substation or a solar farm or any of these other kind of uses that don't fit neatly into those building types. But the way the UDC is set up is that the setbacks and the lot coverage and the lot widths and all of that development regulations are all set by the building type. So that's kind of the form-based code aspect of it. And so while we believe it's able to be made through an interpretation that the director can assign a building type or a certain use to one of these building types that doesn't quite fit neatly into it, we wanted to make it expressly clear that community development director, when they apply for that type of a use, can say, okay, you fit into this building type standard based upon the location of that, the proximity, what's around it, to determine what the most appropriate setbacks are and the development standards are for that use at that site. And so we're just making it especially clear that that the director can make that determination, and then that allows the applicant to, whether it's at the pre-application stage or just in talking with us, then they can go out and plan their site accordingly, rather than just them coming in and telling us what the standards are going to be. We get to tell them what the standards are going to be. So that's the intent of that section under Section 3.
Okay.
Any questions?
All right.
Okay. The fourth section is under residential building type standards. And these would, Matt, can you actually talk about this one, since you did all the hard work on this one? I'll let you describe it.
All right, so the next section is for residential building type standards for the row house building type. This is a residential building type that was added in 2015 UDC. However, it has not been utilized yet by any development projects. We have, of course, presented it to a number of development potential developers. However, some of the way that it's written right now is unclear, even from staff's perspective, on how this is intended to. I think we understand how it's intended to be interpreted, but it's not clear in the language. So this is just clarifying and cleaning up the language to make it clear to the development community on what the intent of this building type is supposed to be. So right now in the UDC, the frontage width for this just says 16 feet to 32 feet. It doesn't specify what that means, if that's the unit, if that's the lot. So to clear that up, we are putting 16-foot minimum to 32-foot max. So we're adding the minimum and maximum on there. And then we're specifying that that is per unit. And then if you, so if you're a middle unit, for example, and the illustration on here on a fourplex, which these are townhomes, so you own your unit as well as the yard, front and backyard that's part of your unit. So for the middle unit here, it's a 16-foot to 32-foot unit. And then on these end units, you also, in addition to your minimum or in addition to your maximum, you get the 5-foot side yard if you're on the end unit, or if you're on a corner, you get the additional 12 feet. So if it's a 32-foot wide unit, you could potentially have 37 feet on this end unit, and then the 44 feet on the corner lot. So that's just specifying that you get to add your corner side or your side yard to your unit in that situation. So you don't end up with a wide unit in the middle and then you have to have a narrow unit on the end, because you can't meet, you have to have the same maximum. And then that area goes along with that. We're changing it from 1,600 square foot minimum. Previously it was a 2,500 square foot maximum, but we're just doubling that 32 to kind of match the 3,200 square feet there. So again, you're adding plus you can add your side or corner side setback area on top of that. Front yard, changing that to, we're just adding the minimum and maximum to it to clarify that. And then at the bottom, the language that's in there right now, it just says no more than 8 lots or units may be attached without a minimum 20-foot separation between adjacent buildings. We're clarifying that because the way that you read that, you could potentially have more than 8 units in a row. And that's not the intent of that. I think even our residential design standards say you can't have more than 8 units attached on the ground level. So we're removing that, and we're just saying no more than 8 lots or units may be attached, and then there's a minimum separation of 20 feet between adjacent buildings, which is required. And then the last section, this row house or this courtyard pattern has been added to a number of building types. And that can be difficult to interpret. So we are proposing to remove that altogether, as we think that more than likely if we saw some kind of a courtyard development where you had multiple fourplexes on one lot, that would probably be more appropriate as a planned development. And so we would just remove that entirely and steer them more in that direction. Any questions on kind of the cleanup here of the row house building type?
Commissioner Fairbanks.
I have too many questions. Would this have been applicable to the proposal we approved a couple of meetings ago on 7th Street Terrace, where weren't they like 4 or 8 units that were side by side?
They were duplexes, and those would have fallen under the downtown development code. So this particular building type would not. This is for 3 units or more. The duplex building type we actually changed the code a couple of years ago to allow those to be split down the middle. Similar to this, only you would have, instead of a 4-plex, you just have a 2-plex with a property line down the middle. So we've already accommodated duplexes through a similar process. So this is just allowing it with 3 to 8-plex units.
I thought those units on 7th Terrace were adjacent to each other with common walls.
They're duplexes, but there were 7 in a row. So there were 14 units, but they were only duplexes. So there were 7 duplexes, but they were not connected.
They did not have common walls.
No, just 2 units did. So they're just duplexes, though.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Yep. Okay, so under section 5, we're accessory uses. We have a couple of changes here. Similar to what we brought before you a couple of months ago was actually part of the medical marijuana code amendments, is that as we have taken references to a use variance out of the code, which is a variance to the allowed uses in a zoning district or a variance to the special use standards. When we brought that forward, we said you can ask for an exception to those special use standards through a conditional use permit process. And so we're now broadening that to say because there's also accessory use standards, such as for home occupations or for other things like that. It's, for an accessory use, it lists all these standards that you have to meet. And if we don't have a variance process for that, we need a way for an applicant to ask for, not necessarily given, but a way to ask for relief from those standards. And so that would have to be done through a conditional use permit. So we're just kind of taking that same philosophy with the special use standards and applying that to the accessory uses. And then in addition, under E, well, are there any questions on that one, first of all? Okay. Nope. The second change under accessory uses is that under E, 3E, the development and operational standards for the height, currently we have that no accessory structure can be taller than 16 feet or the height of the principal structure, whichever is less. And that was a relatively new change that we made within the past 2 years. And that was in response to, I think we had a few ranch houses that were, maybe 16 feet tall, and then they built a 25-foot tall garage in the back because that met the zoning standard of 35 feet. But what we inadvertently did in this is we didn't account for these large lots, residentially estate zoned lots that are over an acre in size, some of which are up to 5 acres in size. And we've had a number of requests over the years for larger accessory buildings because the house may be a ranch house or something like that, and they just can't fit the tractor or the needed equipment to maintain such a large property in an accessory structure that's limited to 16 feet in height. And so this would allow, as written, that it's not going to change what's in the code except to add, except accessory structures within the residential estate zoning district shall not exceed 35 feet in height, which is the base height in that zoning district, when the side and rear setback requirements for accessory structures are increased to a minimum of 25 feet. So in essence, a residential accessory structure benefits from being able to have reduced side and rear setbacks and street side setbacks. They can go down to like 2.5 feet. And so this is saying that if you're in the residential estate zone and you want to build a larger accessory structure taller than that, then it has to comply with the same setbacks that the house would have to comply with, not the setbacks of an accessory structure. So it's in essence allowing a property owner who's got a lot of land to build a larger accessory structure, but it just has to meet the same setbacks as the house. So it doesn't get to go have a 35-foot barn, pole barn in the back that's 2.5 feet off the property line. It needs to comply with the setbacks that are within the residential estate zoning district. So we have had a number of requests over this, and I believe we even took a variance recently within the past 6 months for this because a homeowner up off of Pink Hill area wanted a tractor and couldn't make the garage door fit at 10 feet, then to have that be a 16-foot roof height. So he asked for a variance to be able to build a larger pole barn to be able to fit his equipment to maintain his 3 or 5 acres. So any questions on that one?
Anything? Okay. Yes, yeah, Commissioner.
This is only on the residential estate.
Yes.
So it's not just a large lot, it has to actually be in the residential estate zoning.
That's right.
Otherwise it would then adhere to the other, the 16 foot or less.
The second section, or the next section, section 6, is on parking and loading. And this is addressing our parking maximums. We have a parking maximum that says you can't provide, a site can't provide more than 25% of their required parking on the site, 25% in addition. So if they're required 20 spaces, they can't provide any more than 25 spaces. Is that right? Is that my good math? That's good. Well, yeah, that's good. So this is good and was intended for large commercial developments. This was intended for the Home Depots, the Walmarts, grocery stores, things of that nature. And you know, from an urban design perspective of really trying to limit the sea of parking that's out front. And what we found over the years is that this really hurts the smaller properties, especially smaller properties where there may be an existing building. And the use that they want to put into that building doesn't require as much parking as the previous use did. And so then it's difficult for that property or that business to go locate in a vacant building and propose to do a use there because they have more parking than what they're required or allowed to have. And so in essence, what this is saying is that for any site that requires 40 spaces or less, you don't have to comply with that 25%. You can just provide up to 10 more spaces, or you can't provide up to 10 more spaces, which is 25%. So this is really geared to hitting those smaller properties where, it's not required that they, it's not a building that's required to have 100 spaces. We would still cap that at being 125 spaces. This is for the smaller sites where, for, in essence, 50 parking spaces or less, to try to accommodate and help us generate some more activity on an infill basis throughout some of the vacant buildings that we have in the city. Any questions?
Okay.
Okay. Section 7 is under platting, 403050. 2 changes in this one. Previously, we had a condominium minor plat, which is an outdated type of subdivision plat. Basically, the cities and local jurisdictions don't handle, or local municipalities don't do condominium plats anymore. Those are done at the county level per state law. And so, because it's basically an obsolete plat in our code right now, we decided to change it into what we're calling a townhouse plat. And in essence, we're saying that and these are under administrative plats, so staff can approve these plats. They're meant for kind of low-hanging fruit subdivision plats, lot line adjustments, things of that nature that staff can review against the code, either it meets it or it doesn't, and then get that process moving quickly to help get the building permits moving quickly. So these are minor subdivisions that are done administratively, approved by the director. And the townhouse plat would involve the subdivision of an existing 4 or fewer unit structure and the underlying property into no more than 4 lots, as long as they meet all the other applicable development standards. So this is kind of that instance where you have a 4-plex building that was built as an apartment maybe, or as a condo, and they want to come in and turn those into fee simple lots where you actually own the land and your unit, which promotes home ownership and not just condominiums, but also allow for that townhouse plat. So what we're trying to do is allow that to be done administratively, as long as they can comply with all of the minimum lot standards, setbacks, and things of that nature. The second one under that is under E, and this is a new type of administrative plat called a conveyance plat. We have brought these before, and I think we've called them for sale only plats. And what the essence of that is to allow a developer to take an unplatted piece of ground and to divide it up for the sole purpose of selling chunks of it off. Right now, that happens all the time, and people just take legal descriptions over to the county and it gets recorded, and in essence, a parcel gets split up into 4 parcels. And the city never knows anything about it, and we didn't get a chance to review it or apply our standards. And now we could have 4 parcels that don't meet our standards, or one of them may be landlocked or anything like that. So we have done these as kind of for sale only plats. The 2 key components of this are, in no way would this allow the development to take place, or any kind of development to take place. We want to make that crystal clear. This is just to be able to carve up the land, to be able to sell it, so that somebody else can come in and take it through the formal subdivision, preliminary plat, final plat, where they show us site plans, grant easements, grant right-of-way, all of the things that it takes in order to turn a unfinished piece of ground into a buildable lot. And in order to do that, that's the second part, is we're requiring that those pieces that get divided up would be divided into tracts of land. And a tract of land is an unbuildable piece of ground. That's where in a subdivision you'll find a detention pond or a landscape tract that borders it. they're not meant for structures, and it's not a buildable lot. And so by requiring the builder that if they want to go through this, that they can do it, it doesn't get them out of any future platting steps. It doesn't get them out of any future development procedures. And by requiring them to be in a tract, it doesn't create a buildable lot, and so the building department couldn't issue a building permit on it for a habitable structure or anything of that nature. So this is just kind of putting a little bit more formality to a process we've done before, and to kind of make it a little bit cleaner and more clear for developers that want to do this. We do have this on occasion from time to time, and oftentimes the builders will say, well, I want that to be a lot. I want to be able to carve it up and I'll come back through your process later, and I want to turn this parcel into 2 lots, but I don't know where my access is going to be, and I don't know where the easements are going to be. But what we want to prevent is them from then having a buildable lot, because then somebody 5 years from now, when we're not here, comes in and applies for a building permit, somebody goes and looks at that plat and it's a lot, they can build on it. So this is just kind of formalizing that process and making it administrative, because it really doesn't involve any development at all that would need to come before any board or commission or the council at that time. It's just for the purpose of carving up some lot for future development. And so it's hopefully generating a streamline effect where that can happen, and then maybe those lots come in a little bit quicker, versus having to, in order to buy land or transfer land, go through the full formal platting process when they don't really know what they're going to do in it. Sometimes it's just, in essence, a plat to get through the system when they really don't have any intention of building it that way. So, any questions on that one?
Yes, Commissioner Casey?
Would there be a process for maybe recombining them if a future developer wanted a larger plat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be done back through an administrative plat. But the second that they want to turn those into lots, then they would have to go through the formal platting process.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that kind of like what Timothy Lutheran Church did with their property to the south?
I am not familiar with that. Somebody else?
Because they were for sale only, because I know that we saw for sale only on one of those.
Yeah, we have done them, I would say, a handful of times over the years. Just they're planning to build on one part of it, and they don't know what they're going to do with the other, and so they would do a for sale only plat, which I'm not a big fan of that name. I'd rather make it a little bit, nicer of a word, conveyance plat. But yeah, the purpose is just carve it off so that they could sell it to a future developer who doesn't know what they're going to do with it yet, and they'll come back through the process when they do.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on that? All right.
Okay. The next section, I think it's labeled Section 9, but it should be Section 8. I apologize for that. It's under parking and loading. What we're doing here is tailoring kind of the code in the parking lot dimensions to what's actually applicable and more contemporary in terms of urban design standards today. So currently, well, 2 things we're doing. One is the aisle width. Right now our aisle widths for 90-degree parking are at 28 feet and 26 feet and 25 feet. Those are a lot wider than most kind of generally accepted planning principles are today with smaller cars. The generally accepted, and even in some of the planning design books that we reference in the UDC, show 24 feet. And so we would propose reducing those down to 26 feet, 25 feet, and 24 feet, depending on how wide the parking stall is. The more narrow a parking stall is, the more room you have to maneuver while you're in the drive aisle. And so if you've got a wide parking stall at, say, 9.5 feet, there's a little bit more turning radius and give from room for mistake, if you will, to maneuver in that 24 feet. Versus if you have an 8.5 foot wide stall, that's a foot narrower, and so the cars have to finagle themselves a little bit more in that aisle, and so that's the intent of that. Also, under the stall width, under A, those are just cleanup where it says 8. That should have been 8.5, 9, 9.5. That's just a clerical error that was in the code. So we're just changing that all the way down. And then also changing the one-way travel aisle width depending on the parking lane, stall, and one way with 2 parking on both sides of the street. Or parking, yeah, 2-way traffic with parallel parking on either side. So we're just kind of fine-tuning the code and right-sizing our parking lot design standards a little bit more. We've done this over the years with the amount of parking spaces, and now we're trying to do it with the parking lots themselves, still allowing for, you know, emergency department access. This would not negate any emergency department access. So if, you know, a 6-story building needed a 26-foot wide drive aisle in order to meet the fire department requirements, and our code says 24 feet, well, they're going to give us 26 feet because they want to build the building to the fire code standards. So this is just trying to clean that up and make our parking lots less imposing in real life, but also more contemporary in terms of car sizes and things as you know, the trends are changing. Yeah.
I kind of want to disagree with you on that. With the more and more people driving SUVs and all of that, car sizes aren't shrinking right now. They're actually growing. And extended pickups and everything else. I know I hear all the time how tight some of these parking lanes are, and I really don't want to narrow them down any further.
I agree, because with, if you've ever had, well, hauling your children in and out of the side of the car, grocery carts along the side, opening the doors. I've already got dinged the first time I got my new car. And the worst thing I think is just having smaller aisles.
You get somebody who doesn't pull all the way into their stall, and that makes it narrower also. I don't think I want to narrow those aisles any further. That's just me.
I would have to agree.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have a hard time getting my truck out of places. Or in when they're the narrower spots as well. Any other questions?
No, I'm just in agreement.
In agreement?
With that because I have a small SUV, and sometimes I can park it and I can't even see it when I come back to find my car because of all the big trucks or the big SUVs or the Escalades or whatever. Cars are not getting smaller.
Well, see, we went and we had large cars when we were growing up.
Right.
Then we went to small cars. Now we're back to big SUVs and trucks.
And gas guzzlers.
And, well, I kept a small car. But I know I can't find mine either for all your big vehicles.
Yeah. I mean,
so.
Mine's for work.
Yeah. But I still like the larger aisles.
Okay. The numbers we pulled were from the Planning and Urban Design Manual that's actually referenced in the code, and that cites 22 feet.
That doesn't make
I don't
it right.
care.
I understand. I'm just saying, we didn't make these up.
Yeah.
The key
You don't
word
have to
there is
agree,
urban.
agree.
Nope, I just wanted to let you know where we pulled the numbers.
Yeah. I think the key word is urban downtown.
We could be different.
Okay.
Better.
does this apply also to residential, or is this only for commercial?
This would be anywhere where there's a parking lot, if you will. So
Anywhere there's a lot.
yes, parking lot, such as an apartment complex, or so. Yeah, it would apply in residential for an apartment complex.
Are these minimums, or is that what they have to give you?
Those are minimums.
Okay, they can go larger.
Oh, yeah, they can go larger. It's just sometimes we've seen, some drive aisles at 30 feet, and that's an awful lot amount. That's a lot of pavement.
So this wouldn't apply to communities with townhomes or condos for those type of residential areas?
No,
Not anything that's existing right now. Only if they have a common parking lot.
Do you think that there will be any future conversations about the lanes, how the size of them, about emergency vehicles being able to get down the street, or if there's an issue? Because some neighborhoods
may. I do know that even the fire department is looking at getting smaller fire trucks, if you can believe that. Which is hard for me to believe, but even Central Jackson County told me they were looking at a smaller width fire truck to be able to better maneuver through sites. Typically, the fire department access drive width, if there's no parking on either side, they'd like 26 feet, but they'll go down to 20 feet. But if it's a 3-story building or taller, then they have to have 26 feet, but be able to put the braces out for their ladder truck. I don't know.
I guess one reason I asked is because some units that only have 1-car garages, you might have the residents that have 3 cars that they have, and there's an issue with several cars out on the streets on both sides of the street. So is there any discussion that can be held dealing with that type of situation?
That would fall under the drive widths for the parallel parking on the sides. In terms of the actual clear zone area and requesting that one side be no parking or something of that nature, that'd be done through Public Works. Just in terms of looking at it, yeah, we can continue to look at it.
Any other questions on the parking?
Okay. Section 9 would be the block and lot access for single-family and 2-family residences. This is, in layman's term, the driveway widths for single-family homes. Currently, driveways are limited to 30 feet maximum pavement width where the driveway meets the property line. And so the way it's written now is it says 30 feet, and it could be interpreted as 30 foot per driveway. And so we have some corner lots especially that either have a circle drive or that have a driveway that leads to the garage on the front and then a shed or detached structure in the back. And so we're trying to make it clear is that that's 30 feet total in pavement width, not 3 30-feet driveways. We recently had a building permit come in where they had a driveway off the front, or it was a side corner lot, and they had a driveway or garage off the side yard, and then they had another driveway for kind of a shed and a tractor driveway, and then they had another driveway for a new garage they were going to build. And when we were trying to apply the code, we realized it wasn't clear that couldn't be construed as 30 feet per driveway. So we wanted to make it clear that they're capped at 30 feet per street frontage. And there's an additional provision that for corner lots, the cumulative total of driveway widths, of individual driveway widths at the right-of-way shall not exceed 40 feet. And so we have a couple of pictures in here to show how this could work. Zoom in here for you. So currently, under what we're proposing is that for this single-family house or 2-family dwelling, the 30-foot max would still be the max as it's being interpreted and applied today, but that they could, if they're on a corner lot only, have an additional up to 10 feet for a detached accessory structure, such as a garage or something like that. Or 40 feet if they wanted to split it up, 20 on one side and 20 on the other. And then kind of as a circle drive, where you have 2 driveways access off a corner lot, that would be still a 40-foot maximum in cumulative total, but in no case would there be more than 30 feet of pavement wide on any given street frontage.
Are these new width designations?
The 30 feet has been in the code for 2 years, about 2 years, and so adding the additional 10 feet for the corner lot would be new. And so this would apply to any existing house that wanted to add a new driveway. They would have to conform with these regulations. Even if their existing driveway was, say, 40 feet, they would probably have to pull back some of that in order to get the additional feet on the corner lot.
Okay. The only reason I'm curious is there are a bunch of homes in my subdivision that have 4-car garages. And they have a very, very wide driveway. I don't know how wide, but I would imagine 30 feet. And it goes up and then it fans out.
Yes.
And one of the houses is a corner lot. and it also has a separate driveway into a built-in garage on the side.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm sure that they have more than 40 feet of driveway. So I guess that's why I was curious if it was new.
Well, I think, yeah, the 30 feet, I think it was within the past 2 years since I started here. But yeah, we often do have that where somebody will put a 4th car garage or a 3rd car garage. And so what we would tell them is they have to kind of fan the driveway out that way. And so that they still have no more than 30 feet where it touches the right-of-way line.
Right.
But if somebody wanted to, if they had like a garage back here and they wanted to build a driveway that came in like that, then if they wanted to do that, then that front driveway couldn't be more than whatever it would take to get to 40 feet. It could be 28 and 12 or whatever it would need to be, but they would have to comply with those regulations.
But in your scenario right here, it could be 10 because the 30 is at the street and you're fanning out
That's
past
right.
the street.
Yeah, we have a lot of 4-car garages, and every time one of them comes in, you know, they always, almost every time, the builder says, well, it makes no sense, I want to pull it all the way out. It's 40 feet, and we said, that's not what the code says, that's too wide, you have to cut it back and then angle it in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We love our cars.
Yes. The next section would be, or the section 10, so next to last section would be under fences. Currently, the code says that all fences in front of the front building line shall be taller than no taller than 4 feet. And we're adding a provision that says, except for a detached house, estate lot, building type that fronts on a collector or an arterial street, can have up to a 6-foot tall fence that employs the metal pickets that has that wrought iron style. We don't have a lot of these left in the city. We probably, could have some, but these are designed for, residential, detached house, estate lots, which are large lots. Those are what, over an acre in size, that front onto a busy street. And to be able to afford them a little bit of extra privacy, and to help make that separation between the house and street a little bit more, as long as it's done in that decorative fence type and not a wood privacy fence or anything like that. Staff believes it's appropriate to allow them to go up to 6 feet tall. We have a number of these down on 19th Street and is it Moreland School, where actually I believe the covenants of those houses say it has to be over 5 feet, so it's automatically in conflict with our code. And we've granted variances to almost every one of those houses, and even the one that curves west onto Moreland School. So because this doesn't happen very much, and because we feel like it's not going to have a detrimental impact on any adjacent property and not a detrimental aesthetic impact on the roads because of the collector speeds and the arterial speeds at which cars travel, we felt it was appropriate to be able to allow them to go up to 2 more feet.
I was under the impression that those now are vinyl, and so I'm wondering about the word metal being in there.
I don't believe. I mean, the vinyl pickets are kind of the white ones that look like the old picket fences. The ones that we've seen are the wrought iron style. They're actually made of aluminum because wrought iron is extraordinarily expensive. But most of those that we've seen be put in and that have asked to be put in were metal. They just had a wrought iron style.
Okay, so aluminum would be considered a metal?
Yes. Any more questions on that one? Okay, and the last one under this section of UDC amendments is under building permits. The code currently says that in order for a building permit to be issued on for any type of building permit, this is a fence, a sign that requires a building permit because of if it's got a foundation and things. Any type of building permit to be issued, it has to be a finally platted lot. We have a lot of instances where we have unplatted land, where somebody just wants to put up a fence around the perimeter of their property. or recently we had a subdivision that's coming in that is currently in the process of building, and they're putting in their roads and their infrastructure, and they want to put up a monument sign letting them know, help advertise that there are subdivisions here. But because it's a large monument sign, it needs a foundation, which requires a building permit, and we can't issue a building permit right now for either of those situations because it's not a finally platted lot. And so what we're trying to do is say that the community development director may determine, and I stress may determine, that certain uninhabitable structures may be issued building permits prior to the final plat being recorded. And then get a building permit from the codes administrator. So this just gives the director the ability to make a determination on a case-by-case basis for those kind of one-off situations, like the fence on the property that's been there for 50 years, that they're not going to do any development on it, but the fence is falling apart and he needs to put up a new fence. Currently and technically under the code, we couldn't issue him a building permit for that fence because it's not a finally platted lot. And so we would have to make him go through the entire subdivision process, which is lengthy and costly, to put up a fence. And so there's an element of equitability there that just doesn't kind of make sense in that situation. And in the other situation with the monument sign or some kind of those things that are happening with new subdivisions, they don't get issued the final plat doesn't get approved until all of the infrastructure's in, all the roads, all the sidewalks, everything's been finally accepted by the city. But oftentimes they're wanting to put in some of these marketing devices and wayfinding signage and landmarks to let people know that this subdivision is coming. And so we're trying to offer a little bit more flexibility to the developers. It doesn't say the director has to approve these or is under any obligation to. It just says he has the ability to consider allowing it.
Would that include if they want to get started on like amenities like the pool and the pool house as well, or just monument signage?
Our intent was kind of in the word uninhabitable. So maybe the pool, I don't know if that'd be considered an inhabitable structure, but probably not the clubhouse, but if they had a gazebo or a cabana or something, something along those natures, maybe. That's why we kind of wanted to leave it up to the director's discretion to see what makes sense and timing. Somebody comes in at the beginning, right when they start turning dirt or grading of a site, and they say, I want to put up my monument sign. Well, maybe that's not the appropriate time, but 3 months before they start selling lots and come before city council for a final plat, maybe they're getting a little bit closer. So,
any other questions?
Okay, that concludes staff's presentation on those. Staff looked at these code amendments against the criteria under 403020 that outlines criteria for UDC text amendments and finds that those criteria have been met with these requests and recommends approval, but happy to answer any questions or take down Planning Commission's recommendation for City Council.
Commissioner Phillips.
I have a question probably for our attorney.
Okay.
I don't want to drag this whole thing out and try and break this thing down and vote on all these things individually with roll call votes. But there are a couple of these changes that I really, really like, and there are a couple of these changes that I really, really don't like. How can we make sure that our opinion is clear on how we feel?
You could make
a motion for approval.
Yes, you can make when you make your motion. You're moving to amend and then state what you're amending. And I wrote down, I think, the 2 sections that you were concerned about, so I have those. And take your vote. You could do it that way.
Okay.
Might be simpler.
Again, because I don't want to suggest that we break all these down and vote on each one of them individually. We'll be here till midnight, and I don't want to do that. But.
Can they do them as conditions? Would that be the same thing as amendment and condition?
Could they do it as a recommendation for approval with the exception of section 2 or section 4 or this element of that section or something along those lines, and then we can point that out as part of our recommendation in the staff report that we forward to City Council?
Yeah.
Section 8 was the parking width.
I think that should still be in the motion.
Okay.
So max lot size.
So if you, do you want me to?
I think I can do it.
Maybe number 2.
We'll hold that thought. Because if there's no other questions for staff at the moment.
No, I understand. We're not to that point yet. I'm just getting procedurally.
I'm going to help you.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for staff? Yes.
I'd like to inject an exception also, if I could.
Sure.
I may need some help from the attorney as well. I may have a better way of expressing it. With the driveway and the exception we were talking about the fire chief and maybe the city engineer, that maybe they could do have some more conversations about looking at the areas before they make any approval.
You're talking about the parking width?
Yes.
Yeah, I have that exception as well.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment? Commissioner
Mr.
Banks?
Chair, before somebody makes a motion, can everybody state what their concerns are in what section, so we might know where everybody stands?
Can we do that after I still have to do procedural and then we'll bring it back? And,
Right.
Okay.
I thought I'd be on record that
Sure.
you might want to do that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for staff at the moment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for any witnesses in favor? Any witnesses opposed? Seeing none, then I'll bring it back up here for comments on the record before I close the public hearing. Any comments on the record? Commissioner Fairbanks?
I'm concerned about the height reduction and would prefer it to be
Are you talking
4 to 4 without any reduction in the height.
similar to what Commissioner Billups'
Phillips
concerns
is
were?
talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also on the parking.
As far as the parking widths
Parking widths.
of the spaces as well as the...
As they currently are.
Okay.
Is that just for the 90-degree parking angle?
I think it was just a subsection.
That would be for the 90-degree and the 45-degree, one or both ways.
I think it was 0 degrees. Yeah.
You're talking the full 90 and when you also have the angled in parking as well?
Yes.
Okay.
The aisle width is the only thing. So under 45 degrees.
Aisle widths did not change on those.
The aisle width is not changing on those. Those are staying the same.
The only ones that have changed is on the 90-degree ones, is the proposed
Right,
change.
but then the stall width has changed
yeah.
on 90, 90.
Stall width is just a cleanup.
The stall width of the 8.5 to the 9, that's just a cleanup.
We're actually increasing it.
That's just a cleanup.
That's
Yeah,
just a
those did
cleanup.
not change. They just, there was a miss.
Yeah, it should have read
print.
it should have read 9. Should have been 8.5, 9, 9.5 all the way down.
The only thing that's really changed is the alley width.
Yes.
Okay. All right,
The only
then
substantive
just the
change is the
90
aisle
degree
width.
then, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the record? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And then further discussion prior to anyone making a motion? Or are we got your areas of concern where Mr. Billups, Commissioner Billups could craft a motion?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. Let it fly.
And if I'm wrong, correct me. I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of UDCT 09197081 with 2 exceptions. The exception to the height reduction in 404.240 and the aisle width reduction in section 407.010.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. And this is a roll call vote. Is everyone clear on the motion and the second?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Planning Commissioner Peel.
Nay.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Stokenberry.
Aye.
Commissioner Hose.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks?
Aye.
Commissioner Cradoff?
Aye.
Commissioner Casey?
Aye.
Commissioner Banks?
Aye.
Commissioner Billups?
Aye.
Chairman Graham?
Aye.
Recommended for approval.
Motion carries, so we will send that recommendation to council.
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
This brings us to the next public hearing, which will be Public Hearing Unified Development Code Amendment UDCT 09-197088. I will open the public hearing and ask for exhibits from our city attorney.
Chairman Graham, I offer the following exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 5, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Allen is going to continue on with this presentation as well.
Yes, thank you. These next two code amendments were initiated by City Council and requested for staff to put together regarding short-term loan services and tobacconists. And, sorry. Thank you, Karen. For short-term loan services and tobacconists. And to be clear, in our definitions of tobacconists, that includes all things related to tobacco, including vape, e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, all of that falls under tobacconist. And that land use is just a store where that's primarily what they do, like a cigar store or a vape shop or something like that, discount cigarette store, something like that. This does not apply to a gas station or a liquor store or something along those lines where they happen to sell those products. So that falls under the definition of tobacconist. So what these proposed amendments would do, well, let me take a step back. The city has had regulations in place for short-term loan establishments since about 2007. And most recently adopted UDC regulations for tobacconists in about February or January of last year. The request has been to, and as such, it puts, for both of those, it puts a per capita ratio limit or a cap on how many of those establishments, both of them, you can have per certain number of residents based upon the census population number from 2010, and then it also establishes a separation distance. So for short-term loan service, the current regulation says that you can't have a short-term loan service establishment locate or expand within 200 feet of any residentially zoned lot or within 1,500 feet of any school, elementary school, high school, park, recreation, or those recreation use as defined in the city code. Those separation distances are measured as a straight line, so as the crow would fly. So it's a larger buffer than, say, for example, the medical marijuana separation distance was by foot. In addition, under short-term loan service, it says no short-term loan service shall be allowed to locate or expand within 1,500 or 1,500 feet of any other short-term loan service, or within 1,500 feet of any pawn shop, precious metal, or gem dealer as they're defined under our business licensing section. And in addition, there's a separation or a distance requirement for short-term loan service that they can't be within 1,500 feet of the city limit of the city of Blue Springs. The proposed amendment would increase those distances under B and C from 1,500 feet to 2,500 feet. And then in terms of the population per capita cap, if you will, it would raise the number of people from being able to have one short-term loan service per each increment of 4,500 people to one per 12,000 people. Any questions on those for short-term loan?
I'm just curious how that would affect it right now. Is that still leave room for any of these businesses to come in, or are we maxed out based on
currently, the numbers? We have, I've printed out some of the numbers, and these can change from day to day, but right now we have 9 of 12. We have 9 short-term loan services, and then we're allowed 12. So if this were to pass, that 12 would dramatically drop, and
so there wouldn't be any room for any others.
It would not be room for any more, and the ones that are already over would be grandfathered in. But if they were to go out of business, then they would keep whittling them down until they met that number.
Okay. Same with the tobacconists?
Same with the tobacconists. We're at, right now we have 5 of 6 allowed, and so if we increase that percentage, which I'll describe here in a second, it would further reduce the total number that we're allowed. Also, by increasing the separation between the businesses and in particular the separation from the city boundary really restricts the ability of these to be located in the city.
I would think just the number would do the restrict.
The number does a restriction, but then the added distance does a number. No, it does has a pretty significant impact on it as well.
Okay.
I noticed on the tobacconist, it's the last decennial, but on the short-term loans, it's annually on the population.
Yes, that's because they were written at different times, and so when the payday loan was written, it was probably decided to be annually, and then when the tobacconist came in, it was based on the census. So obviously, as the city continues to grow, if we continue to use the number from 2010, we're going to get a smaller number. So that could have been behind why those different numbers or different census data are in there.
So is it good to have them separate, or is it better to make them both the same?
And I can't tell you from an effect that it'll have but what I can tell you from an implementation and an enforcement standpoint by staff, it really doesn't make a difference because we go to the code section and read the code and apply whatever that code section is. In terms of the overall effect, I can't speak to that. So yes. I didn't actually get to read the tobacconist one. You know, if everybody's okay. The only thing we're doing on that, or we're doing 2 things, is increasing the ratio from 1 establishment per 8,000 residents to 1 per 12,000. And then we're also including, it basically says tobacconists may not locate or expand any existing operation within 500 feet of any residential use district, church, school, or park. And we're adding a separation between tobacconists themselves, similar to the payday loan. So I just wanted to get that out there before we start jumping into all the questions.
Thanks. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in the past when we've kind of looked at these sorts of businesses for regulating, we've also looked at tattoo parlors. Is that right?
Tattoo parlors, body art is one of the other ones that has a per capita cap, if you will.
Right. So I guess I was just wondering if that had been considered as part of this, or why it wasn't.
It had not been considered as part of this. We did have a request for that actually pretty recently. A resident had reached out to a few council members, but I don't know if there was enough support in order to bring that forward, and so staff did not get direction to bring that one forward at this time.
Okay.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Phillips?
Is it appropriate for me to ask our city council representative about the discussion that occurred to prompt these requests for change?
I think you can do that now.
Yes. I guess behind the scenes, I've seen Council Member Culpepper lobby for these and talk of them. And I think it's just to put further regulation on the number of them. You know, really the impact is probably the per number of citizens that we have. Mm-hmm. And you know, her influence was that I guess the ultimate property values of our city and everything like that, because she believes that it can impact them negatively if you get too many of these businesses.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll wait for the comment section.
Okay. Commissioner Peel?
Chair and Mr. Mallon, Would it be correct to state that there's a provision that prevents any additional payday loans from entering the city at all?
As of today, the current regulations would allow up to 3 more based upon the existing number, the existing ratio.
But with the projected amendments to that, isn't there an additional that they're not permitted within the city limits?
Yes, the ratio would go down. So at 41 per 4,500, based upon the census or yearly census, which we're at about, what, 5,400, 5,500 people, that's how we get to that number of 12. And so if we up that to 12,000, then it goes down, the number of establishments, and we would already be over the cap that we have.
Okay, so, but it really doesn't matter then on population count, because doesn't the amendment state that it is a certain footage from city boundaries?
That is an additional level of measurement, and really aiming to help steer these into certain locations within the city.
So that could possibly, if there was an opening under this, the distance requirements could also, even though we're allowing one, could still prohibit it because there's not a place for it to go.
That's correct.
Does that answer kind of your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Fowler?
Yes, I had one more comment. I did recall, and I'll ask our city attorney, may have better recollection on this than I am. I think I heard that our neighboring cities were also reviewed, and that they had a tougher standard than we have, and we're talking about making our standard almost equivalent to where they're at. Is that?
I just looked at, when I was reviewing it, I looked at the independence ordinances, and I think it was the same on the population.
The same as the existing or the same as the proposed?
The proposed. So it was also 1 per 12,000,
yeah,
if I remember correctly. But I don't know about the separation.
I think I have that somewhere. But yeah, I think in terms of, we did do some research. Some cities do have, in terms of payday lending or short-term loan service, almost every city in the metro has some sort of regulation on that. And some of those are more strict than ours are currently. In terms of the tobacco and the vape retailers, there aren't many other cities that specifically have land use or per capita restrictions on those land uses themselves. I think Independence and Raytown were the other two, and I believe the proposed would be more in line of what Independence would be in terms of ratio based upon population.
Okay.
It's a dramatic increase on the short-term loan services from 1,000 to 2,500. That's a huge bump.
It'd be from 1,500 to 25, but yes, it is a big, that does have a big impact.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to ask if there's any witnesses in favor. Any witnesses opposed? I'll bring it back up for additional comments on the record, if any.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Billups.
When I read this, my first thought was, why do we need to do this? The free market has already reduced the number of payday loan establishments in the city. We've had 2 or 3 of them that have closed and gone out of business, I'm assuming because they weren't making any loans or weren't making enough to justify them staying open. And I hate to, I like to let the system work that way instead of us trying to regulate the number of, what somebody can come in and do as a legal business. I'd much rather look at, and I know it's hard to do this and I know you can't do it, the interest rates and that sort of thing, to regulate the industry rather than the number of locations and stop somebody from doing it. And then on the tobacco side, it's kind of the same argument. If we're looking at a public safety issue or a public health issue, We're not limiting the sale of cigarettes or vapes or anything else because they're still allowing as many people who want to sell them in grocery stores, in convenience stores, in gas stations, and everywhere else in town. All we're doing is hurting the one little individual who says, well, that's my business and that's all I want to do is sell cigarettes. I don't want to sell gasoline. I don't want to sell soda pop. I don't want to sell anything else. I think we're really infringing on some free market rights here, and I'm not in favor of making any of these reductions.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Peel.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to echo Commissioner Billups' concern is that I believe both of these are probably a restriction of the exercise of free enterprise.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Commissioner Casey.
I'll go ahead and take the opposite approach. For me, I think it's okay if cities want to take a look at these and have a little bit of guidance into how the city grows and develops, and just try to put limits on some of these undesirable businesses that we don't want to become the focal point of our city. So for me, I would approve of these.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I'll comment, but
Commissioner Banks?
Along with my fellow commissioners on this side, that I don't like to limit the availability of doing business, and I think that the public will determine whether they should be here or not.
I tend to agree with you. So, any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And is there any further discussion? It'll just be off the record, but you can still comment.
If we're going to be really, really, really restrictive on car washes, that is a free enterprise also. But everybody up here throws up their hands when we see another car wash application. And that's a free enterprise system also.
I don't do that. I don't say that. I say let the market determine how many car washes and how many we're going to have, and if they want to put themselves right next to each other, let the market decide who's going to win and who's going to lose.
The one behind Quick Trip hasn't moved any dirt that I have noticed.
The only one I voted against was because it was not an appropriate location. It had nothing to do with how many car washes we had in town.
And I know where that one was. Same one I voted against too.
The one on I-70 and 700.
Yes.
But otherwise.
I'm going to try to keep you on track though, because we're not discussing car washes.
No, I understand. I just don't want to have my position unfairly represented.
I understand. Yeah. And if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion of some sort.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Casey.
I'll go ahead and move that UDCT 09197088 be approved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Casey. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Hose. This will be a roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Planning Commissioner Sanderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stokenberry?
Nay.
Commissioner Hose?
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks?
No.
Commissioner Cradoff?
Aye.
Commissioner Casey?
Aye.
Commissioner Banks?
Nay.
Commissioner Billups?
Nay.
Commissioner Peel?
Nay.
Chairman Graham?
Nay.
Okay, the nays have it.
That motion did not pass, so we send a recommendation to council of denial. All right, brings us to our last public hearing of the evening. Now, I'm going to make you adhere to that 10-minute rule on the presentation time. I'm just kidding. So I will. Our next public hearing is UDCT 0919-7089. I will open the public hearing for Unified Development Code Amendment. I will ask our city attorney for exhibits.
I offer the following exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. 2, application with attachments. 3, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on September 28, 2019. 4, Title IV Land Use Section Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And 5, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference. That's all the exhibits.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Mallon.
Thank you once again. This set of UDC amendments is necessary to mirror the recently enacted state statutes that were passed during the last legislative session that took effect, I believe, in late August. And what those do is allow, in essence, for third-party building inspections. So for a, it allows, and I'll try to make this as layman terms as possible, but when building plans get submitted to the city, they're sealed by an engineer or an architect that's licensed in the state of Missouri. And what this new state law does is it allows whoever that engineer or architect was who sealed those plans and put his stamp on it to be the third-party inspector for certain stages of the construction of and this only applies to 1- and 2-family homes. And specifically, those are for the footing, the foundation, the wall, and framing inspections. And so in order to implement that, we need to amend our UDC, and there's also a subsequent amendment to Chapter 500 of the Building Code. And those the code basically says right now you can't, only the city can do inspections, and the codes administrator has to, in essence, sign off on it. And what these amendments to Chapter 403, Section 403.120, provides a new section B, which states, for new construction of 1- and 2-family residential dwelling, the licensed engineer who sealed the ultimate submission of plans for the permit shall be allowed to conduct the footing, foundation, wall, and framing inspections in accordance with the procedures for such inspections established by the city. And such licensed engineer or architect shall report on such work using the uniform inspection forms used by the city. So they have to follow our same process. They have to use our same form. But in essence, that third-party inspector is able to do that inspection for those certain aspects of the building of those homes. And so in order to implement this newly enacted state law, we need to make those changes to the UDC. And that's it.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Billups.
I'm sorry.
Not at all. Don't be sorry.
First off, I understand this is state law, so we definitely have to hold that into our thinking here. And I like the idea that this may speed up the process a little bit. Again, I'm all for streamlining and speeding up processes. My only concern with this, and I don't know if it's addressed in here or in the state law, is with the liability if one of these inspections turns out to be faulty. In other words, a basement collapses after it got approved by a third-party inspector because they didn't follow the code and didn't see that it wasn't correct. Is that inspector then going to be held liable for that, or is the city still somehow going to be liable for allowing the inspection to be approved?
I would have to defer to our city attorney on that.
That's a really good question, and I haven't looked at the state statute for a couple of months, but I don't think it was addressed.
It needs to be.
So you're right. And I'm sure it will be.
In the court, if nothing else.
Would this be applicable to townhomes and condos as well?
Anything that's a single-family home or a duplex.
Or a duplex?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we often find that after
1 to 2.
A new facility's a home's been built, maybe a year or two later, if the HOA is involved, you're eligible, you're responsible for your insurance from the inside out, and they're responsible for another portion of it. So the person who's buying the place is kind of stuck with getting that repair work done. And I kind of disagree with the commissioner about the inspection not being important. I'd rather have an inspection than not have one, because you see some of these places come up and they've not been developed very well.
Yeah. Yeah, staff had a number. The state law that was actually enacted was a very whittled down version of what the Home Builders Association of Kansas City had tried to get through, and this was one of the ones that was remaining that impacted. And staff obviously had some concerns with that, but seeing as though it's state law, we have to implement it and provide the means to allow these third-party inspections.
But it has to be the one that has sealed the plans.
Yes,
it has to be the one that sealed the plans. It'd have to be the one that sealed the plans.
It has to be the engineer that sealed the plans. Not,
yes, that's what it says.
It can't be somebody else in the firm who sealed the plans. It has to be that individual with their license. And so ultimately, from my understanding with the way the seals and the licenses work, is that if somebody's found to be in gross negligence of their work, they can lose their license.
Which I'm assuming the builder chooses who they want to have the plan sealed by anyway, so that's probably who they'd want to do the inspections as
Yes,
well.
I would.
So.
Yeah.
Commissioner Peel.
Yes, Mr. Mellon, this may involve council as well. But if there's a tie or there's a difference of opinion, who arbitrates? Does the state arbitrate?
I don't recall any.
In terms of if the
Well, the engineer says it should be this way, but the city says it should be this way.
Well, I think if the engineer inspects, the city's not going to go out, are they?
No, we won't.
You have to accept it.
We'll have to accept.
It'll be an engineer's in lieu of the city going out.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's how it works. How this actually works, I'm not really. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but
I think Independence does it because my foundation company will have a third-party engineer come out and do the footing.
Right. And I know Kansas City allows
their report to the city.
And Kansas City allows third-party inspections and things of that nature. So other cities are doing this. It's just that have already been doing this. And during the DAC, Development Advisory Commission meeting, which I forgot to mention that we had one, and they voted unanimously to recommend this. One of the members stated that most cities throughout the state are doing this, but a lot of littler cities haven't done this yet. And I'm not suggesting that Blue Springs is a little city by any means. It's just that we hadn't adopted this provision yet, and so that's why the HBA went to the state level, is to make sure it was uniform across the board.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I will ask for witnesses in favor. Witnesses opposed. I'll bring it back up here for any other comments on the record. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And
Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Commissioner
make a
Banks.
motion to approve the United Development Code Amendments, UDCT-09-19-7089.
I'll second it.
I have a motion from Commissioner Banks, second from Commissioner Fairbanks. This will be a roll call vote.
Planning Commissioner Stokenberry.
Aye.
Commissioner Hose.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks.
Aye.
Commissioner Cradoff.
Aye.
Commissioner Casey.
Aye.
Commissioner Banks.
Aye.
Commissioner Billups.
Aye.
Commissioner Peel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Chairman Grant.
Aye. We will send that to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Yes.
All right. That brings us to other business. Mr. Mallon, do you have other business?
No, we do not have any other business. We do have a meeting currently scheduled for Monday, October 28th, and we do have an application on that agenda. So
Okay.
we will have a meeting on the 28th.
All right. Any other business from the commissioners?
How do we find out what the city council has approved or rejected?
There's a recap.
Online.
You can pull up minutes on.
You can pull up the minutes on
So we
mine.
never discuss it here.
Yeah.
We never come back around and,
Same place where you see our agendas and minutes. You can go back to City Council's agenda and minutes and just pull up and see
Yeah.
what they voted as well. Or you can go back and watch them.
no,
On
I just was wondering if we,
channel.
if we ever discussed it here as a commission.
Not
No.
usually, no.
No. I can forward the recap that we received, staff receives from the city clerk, Cheryl Morgan. I can forward that to you.
That'd
We
be
get-
great.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay. Any other business? Going once? Going twice? Seeing none?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn if you.
I would love to have a motion for adjournment. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.